Rich, but we got no Gama.
There
He's back there.
Gama.
Okay, 529.
Mayor, this meeting is now called to order, the time being 5:30. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Gama,
I am here.
Councilmember Rollins,
Here.
Councilmember Munoz-Schnapp,
Here.
Vice Mayor.
Pro Tem.
Not today.
I'm
Mayor
I'm
Pro
here.
Tem Hernandez and Mayor Berg.
He's here too. Thank you very much. It's now time for public comments. Seeing nobody in the audience for making comments, we'll forego that. So the mayor, we have designation of agency representatives for labor negotiations with SEIU 721. And that's the Service Employees International Union Local 721. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Mayor, we're going to recommend a change to the agenda, and the city attorney is going to walk us through that. This was recommended by the assistant city attorney, and we have probably a smoother way of handling the same action. So city attorney can walk us through that, and we'll change the agenda to reflect this.
Well, if you think that's best.
Yeah.
Yes, not that the mayor previously mentioned it or anything, but rightfully so, it makes sense to take that consent item number 1 and include it in the closed session, which we are meeting on, because we can decide on the representatives in that meeting and then report that out. And that allows you to discuss it in the full context of what's going on and who might be appropriate.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
I'd also like to point out, well, let's do this when we convene back for the open session, because we want to point out that there was an addendum to the closed session, to the consent agenda.
Okay. Any other comments from any of the council members? Very well then, we will recess into closed session, time being 5:32.
I'm required by law to read the,
that's right.
the 2 items, so. The council will adjourn to closed session on 2 items, both conference with labor negotiators, both under the authority of Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency, the first is with Port Hueneme Police Officers Association. The agency designated representatives are Stephen M. Berliner, Special Counsel Edward Rea, RGS HR Consultant, and Ken McDonald, Finance Director. The second is with Service Employees International Union 721, and the agency designated representatives are Mr. Berliner and Mr. McDonald.
Very good. The time being now 5:33, we can now recess into closed session.
I know, but I didn't know till you did.
You're on, huh?
Are we having fun yet?
Yeah, why don't we take a moment, you guys? We've got a proclamation to sign here and a pen to sign it with.
Is this for the...
It's for a cybersecurity conference this Saturday.
Okay.
We're giving it to, I think, Jackie Irwin, or to the...
There's not a presentation on it, or is it? Okay.
And I know you guys have been paying attention to this, right? Sign.
No, we're not. So we're supposed to read that out. No, I already did it.
Thank you.
Today's the 19th.
Is this yours? Oh. I had an idea. I was going to look at it, look something up.
Okay. back the wheel, because there's lots of stuff in here.
Yeah, it's
Little
good. I
things.
was gonna find something more.
Okay. He could hardly print, much less sign.
That's why he signed it and didn't read it. I wanted to see you read it out loud.
He sent those to me, so, thanks. I think I'll just, are we gonna talk about it here
No,
today?
I just wanted to make sure that you had it. I
Okay.
can take it back to the office if you want to come get it later in the week.
No, I'm gonna go take a bite of my soup and then I'll take it and put it in there.
10.
How about if we take a crew and film your exploits over the weekend?
You don't want to see that.
As long as the vote isn't called monkey business.
Oh, that was,
Yeah, very hard.
Are you going to put up IDF? Also, I gotta see the.
Did you get any of your dinner eaten before you had to come in?
I had a little bit before I,
Or maybe you could sneak it out and take a bite once in a while.
no, I'm good. Finish the paper. Karen, how are you?
Right?
Our meeting is now reconvened, and the time is now 6:30. Madam Clerk, if you'd please call the roll.
Councilmember Gama,
Here.
Councilmember Rollins,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hernandez,
Here.
Mayor Verg.
Here. We have our agenda. Do we have any members who wish to pull any items from the agenda? Can we have an approval or any motions?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Have a second?
Second.
We have a
I should point out, Mr. Mayor, that the consent agenda item number 1 was actually removed from the consent agenda and placed on the closed session agenda and will be reported out with that. So if I read this correctly, that's the only consent agenda item, so we don't need a vote on that.
Well, there are 3 other consent agenda items.
Are there?
So
I don't-
perhaps we should report out on the
Oh, they're down
closed
here,
session then?
okay. Let's do that.
Let's report on the
Great
closed
idea.
session, and then we'll go to the agenda.
The council met in closed session on 2 labor negotiation items. On item number 1, conference with labor negotiations in connection with the Port Hueneme Police Officers Association, there is no reportable action. In connection with item 2, labor negotiations with the Service Employees International Union 721, there is a reportable action which would have been on the consent item number 1. The council, by unanimous vote, appointed the city's designated representatives in that negotiation to be Stephen M. Berliner, Special Counsel, and Ken McDonald, Finance Director. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good, thank you very much. And so we will start our meeting with the flag salute. If Councilmember Gama would still lead us in the flag salute.
Just place the right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And Mayor Pro Tem Hernandez, for our inspiration, please.
Thank you. I'm honored to deliver the inspiration for tonight's meeting. On this day, February 19th, 1968, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood first debuted nationwide in the United States. Many of you grew up knowing Fred Rogers and watching him on TV. He became a very popular and a beloved TV figure for many children growing up. And in fact, last year, in 2018, they created a movie in his memory. He passed away on February 27th, 2003, and this movie has become quite popular. It's called Won't You Be My Neighbor, and it examines the life and ideology of Fred Rogers, the beloved host of the popular children's television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I just wanted to share with our audience today one of his inspirational quotes that we've heard many times, but I think it not only applies to children, but it applies to adults too. And it goes like this: knowing that we can be loved exactly as we are gives us all the best opportunity for growing into the healthiest people. So with that said, I'll say it again. Knowing that we can be loved exactly as we are gives us all the best opportunity for growing into the healthiest people. And I would say to all of us, it's never too late. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, we have read the roll call, right? We've done that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're set to go then. Thank you. Get there at the end anyway. It is now, let me see, we had our roll call. So do any members wish to pull anything from the agenda? Nothing, and we have had an approval for the agenda, I believe so. Let's move on to our public comment. This is that period where everybody's given an opportunity to address the council on anything not on the agenda. So I do have one public speaker's card. It is from Amanda Fagan. Where is Amanda? There you are. I was looking for you earlier. Don't go. I need to see you tonight too.
Well, thank you, Mayor Berg, members of the City Council, and Mr. Butler. My name is Amanda Fagan, and I'm the Community Planning Liaison Officer for Naval Base Ventura County. In the spirit of communication strategies from the Naval Base Ventura County Joint Land Use Study, I was here at the last council meeting to share with you information regarding Naval Security Forces exercise that took place over the first 2 weeks of February. And this evening, I am coming to you with 2 additional exercises that will be coming up in the coming weeks at the Naval Base. And I have been flying all over Ventura County back and forth today, so please forgive me for
You probably
being a
have to
little late
fly
running
because you
around.
can't get on the streets around the Navy base. It's too crowded.
Today, mostly in Oxnard and Ventura. There will be 2 exercises that are coming up at the base in the coming weeks. The first is Exercise Pacific Blitz. United States Marines, sailors, and soldiers will participate in Exercise Pacific Blitz at various training facilities and at sea in Southern California across the region from March 12th through the 26th. This exercise is designed to test our force's ability to plan, communicate, and conduct combined amphibious operations over great distances. Forces will enhance expeditionary logistics capabilities and rehearse concepts in simulated contested environments. Measures have been taken to minimize disruptions within the local communities and to normal base operations. But there may be times before, during, and after the exercise with increased traffic around the bases or delays in base access. Area residents may also see or hear transportation and security activities associated with the exercise starting at the end of February. Also in March, Naval Base Ventura County Point Mugu will support a large force exercise that will bring approximately 12 to 14 additional FA-18 aircraft to Point Mugu to conduct unit-level training on the Point Mugu Sea Range. Just to be clear, that exercise takes place over the sea range and does not occur over land. But the aircraft do transit across the land in order to land on arrival and departure at the naval base. For more information, you can always follow us on Facebook at Naval Base Ventura County or call NBVC Public Affairs at 805-989-9234. Naval Base Ventura County has an annual economic impact to Ventura County of $2 billion and supports over 20,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs. Our ability to support these unique and important training, testing, and operational missions, such as Pacific Blitz, are key to the future of NBVC. So we greatly appreciate your continued support of all of our local partners, including the City of Port Hueneme, as well as the surrounding community. And thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay. No more comments, and we move on to the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. One is our minutes of the canceled meetings of August 6th and September 4th and October 15th and January 7th, and the regular meeting of December 17th. Another item is our cash disbursements, and third item is the establishment of the comprehensive pay schedule for the city employees. Anybody wishing in the audience to address any of those 3 items are now invited to come up and address the council, and if not, I would ask for a motion from the council.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, we do have somebody. And Tom, please make it a point when you're done to fill out a card, because I get in trouble if I don't turn them in.
Really an incidental. Tom King, Port Hueneme. Mr. Mayor, City Council people, and staff. It's just an incidental comment. Did a little homework in regards to what some past employees, city staff employees, have been paid. Dave Norman in particular, Cynthia Haas, just to kind of get a feel for what costs are. General costs. But what I noticed, and the incidental comment, is that I don't see what the additional costs are in terms of retirement, in terms of general other costs. I do see them for the previous staff members. I can enumerate those, but I don't think you really want me to. But I'm talking about it's really retirement, the benefits that might include health care. I'm not singling out that particular position. I want that to be clear. It's just that, you know, I had to use something as a reference. So it's Dave Norman in 2012, Robert Bravo 2013, Cynthia Haas, and now Rod. So I just would hope, because my concern, I hope everybody's concern, is again how we're spending the money. I'm certain that we're going to be very careful, but that's my chief concern again because of Measure U, because of some of these other opportunities that we have to generate revenue. So that's why I'm mentioning this.
Thank you very much. Please understand we can't address the item. We can direct staff to maybe bring that up at a future council meeting.
Mr. King, were you commenting specifically in reference to number 5, which was this comprehensive pay schedule, or was that just kind of a general comment?
I was looking on the city website and I saw enumeration of expenses and also pay. And so I recognize there's a protocol. I'm really trying to follow it. So I haven't mentioned really specifically any numbers, but just my real concern has to do with future spending. Because I
Sure.
know there's pressure to do a lot for our community. I'm concerned about how we spend the money. That's it. Thank you.
I believe we will be hearing something later tonight about what is called the other post-employment benefits, or OPEB.
That's true.
Which is going to be coming up in our conversations as soon. And that is, looks like you have something you want to say.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out that there was an addendum to consent item 5.1, which was provided a couple of days ago. It amends the police sergeant job classification specifications. So it was posted and so on, but I wanted to mention it for the people who are watching on television or whatever. They can see this on the website if they have any questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so did we get a motion and a second on the consent agenda?
I thought I made a motion earlier. I'm not sure if it's still.
Did she?
Did we? And, okay, all in favor say aye. Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Now we go to item number 6. This is a public hearing on amending section 10802 of chapter 6 of article 10 of the Port Hueneme Municipal Code pertaining to development standards for accessory dwelling units. People will hear about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, more and more in the future. Sacramento is discovered them now, and they're really going to be pushing this for all communities to start considering.
ADUs.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, members of council, staff. That's a good start and lead into this discussion. This was originally supposed to be part of a larger code cleanup that we'll be bringing to you in a couple of months, and we'll discuss that a little bit more later. But because of the interest now that we've been experiencing in the past year and a half or so in accessory dwelling units, we felt that since the city's not in compliance right now with the state regulations, at least completely in compliance, that we were going to go ahead and pull that forward and move it on by itself. So here we are this evening to discuss accessory dwelling units. Government Code Section 65852, which became effective on January 1st, 2017, sets forth development standards for ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. The state basically brought these forward due to the housing crisis. However, what they passed was what's basically one size fits all. So basically, it doesn't matter what city you are, what type of development pattern you have, you are required to comply with the state requirements. And if you don't have a compliant ordinance, then you have to use their standards. So most land use standards that cities used to enjoy with regard to ADUs have been stripped from the cities, but there are a few standards left, and so we want to preserve those by making sure that our ordinance is compliant with state requirements and still incorporates the few custom development standards that we are afforded by the state. So with regard to our current ordinance, and we call them right now secondary housing units, but so the first big change is we'll be calling them accessory dwelling units. We are currently fairly in compliance with state law, but there are a few significant changes. I mentioned those in the staff report. I also gave you a red line version of the proposed text and also the clean text in the ordinance. The three biggest changes between what we currently have in our code and what the state mandates, first of all, is that we do not currently allow detached accessory dwelling units. Our accessory dwelling units have to be attached to the primary residence. State mandates that we have to allow detached ones as well, and they can be within 5 feet of the side and rear property lines, which is also a reduction in setbacks from our current standards. So to be compliant with state regulations, we have inserted that text, and that would allow us to provide the standards for detached accessory dwelling units. The second one has to deal with parking, and this is where it kind of gets, I think it's the most significant for cities such as our own, where our single-family residential lots are fairly small in size. 6,000 square feet is the minimum lot size. As you probably are well aware, quite a few of our neighborhoods have experienced or are experiencing parking issues right now, even without accessory dwelling units. What the state requires now, or let me back up. So what we currently require is that if somebody, say, wants to convert their garage that's attached to their house into an ADU, because it's fairly affordable to do so, we would require them to build a new garage. State law doesn't allow us to do that anymore. State law allows us to tell them to put 2 parking spaces on the site somewhere, but that could be in the driveway, it could be tandem, it could be in a lift. So basically, we're no longer allowed to require that new garage. The other thing that the state law does, and doesn't do for us, is that we are allowed to require a parking space for the ADU. However, if that ADU is within half a mile of transit, then we cannot require that. And unfortunately, most of our lots here in the city are within a half a mile of transit. So you can see this could become a real parking issue. And unfortunately, we are stuck or bound by the state law to require these. But the third change that we are proposing, which isn't necessarily specific to state law, but it's something that other cities have done, is that we are going to require that the folks that want to construct an ADU on their property enter into an affordable housing agreement. And that's a 55-year term, basically. And what that does, there are 3 things actually that it does. First of all, it makes this person really think, do they want to have an ADU on their property? Right now, again, it's not very expensive to convert a garage into an ADU and charge somebody a couple $1,000s a month for it, to the detriment of their neighbors. And while one of these scattered around is fine, the state law allows these to be constructed in any single-family developed property. So it could have a cumulative impact. So what this basically does, again, is requires this affordable housing agreement, but it also allows the city to meet the intent of the accessory dwelling unit laws, which is, again, to provide affordable housing options. And so this ensures that the primary goal of that law is met, but it also allows us to meet our, what we call the RHNA, or Regional Housing Needs Assessment requirements. And in a couple, I guess March 18th, I'll be discussing this in further detail with our general plan update, but the state, through the Housing Community Development, or HCD, agency, it sets forth every few years a minimum number of affordable housing units that we have to provide for, basically. And we've been lucky that because we're built out, we only have 2 units. So it seems easy that we could comply with this by 2021, which is the deadline, but the state's already coming down on cities, including ourselves, even before 2021, saying that we're out of compliance because they haven't been built. And HCD keeps getting stricter and stricter and stricter, and as many of us heard this morning, now it looks like the governor may even be considering taking away our transportation funding if we don't provide for these housing units. Fortunately, HCD does allow ADUs to be considered towards meeting our affordable housing requirements. And so by providing this requirement for the actual affordable housing agreement, that basically mandates that these units are affordable, gives us the tool to do so, and allows us to meet these requirements and therefore be compliant with HCD requirements. So there were a few other tweaks that we made. For instance, right now we have a maximum size of 640 square feet. State allows us to make that basically what we want it to be, generally no more than 50% of the size of the primary dwelling unit. Here in the city, as you know, many of our dwelling units are actually fairly small. So for instance, if you've got a 1,000 square foot dwelling unit, 640 square feet is much larger than 50%. So we've got a requirement for 640 square feet or 50%, whichever is less. We will be, or at least we're proposing to, instead of requiring no more than 2 people per dwelling unit, we're going to base it on bedroom size or the actual unit size, which is 1 per bedroom. And that would allow us to more easily regulate the actual population in the unit itself. The city of Camarillo, for instance, does that. So instead of saying 2 people per unit, it would be 1 bedroom per unit instead. We still have our other amenities in place, such as utility requirements and whatnot. We've already been requiring owner occupancy agreements that are tied to the property, the actual the tax rolls, the assessor tax rolls. So we will continue to do those, but also have that affordable housing agreement attached to it. So basically everything else, what we have in our current standards would stay the same. And again, with these these 3 major changes to our existing ordinance, we would hopefully be in compliance with HCD at this point. So what would happen here is that if you approve the ordinance, we would then, within 60 days per state requirements, send this up to HCD for their blessing. Assuming that they bless it, then we do have a fully compliant ordinance to move forward with our future ADU development. So with that, concludes my presentation.
Okay, before we go to questions, I have to do a little housekeeping here. If I could ask if any of the members of the council here have any disclosures, any ex parte communications with anybody regarding this issue at all? Anything to declare? Nothing to declare. Good. Madam Clerk, do you have proof of publication as required by law?
Yes, sir.
And do we also have all the documents, files, exhibits, et cetera, that we
Yes, you
need?
do.
And have you received any correspondence on this matter?
No, I have not.
You have not, okay. And so we've received our report now, so now if we could have questions, and yes, Rich.
I just have 2. Many HOAs require that the garage stay as a garage and not be converted into any other, be it storage or any kind of living space. Would the new state rules rescind that ability for HOAs to require that?
Yes and no. If it's a R1 zone property, then yes, the state would overrule that. Most of our HOAs, however, are zoned R2 or R3, which is our medium and multi-family zoning. The state does not require us to allow ADUs in those zones, and we are proposing to maintain our existing requirements of R1 zone only. So in that case, most of our subdivisions, our condo developments and whatnot that do have garages would not be subject to these regulations. In fact, we would not allow ADUs within those developments.
Okay, and then my second question, I'm not sure if it's the appropriate term. I've heard the term granny flats, where you provide a facility for a relative at a low cost. Would that then, if they said they were going to be providing a granny flat in this newly developed garage, would that meet the affordable housing?
That's actually a very good question. First of all, granny flats are now lumped into the term ADU. So
Okay.
there are many terms for it. And our way of thinking and what the other cities have done is there are a couple ways to not be required to have the actual affordable housing agreement. One would be if it was for an actual non-rent paying relative, for instance, turning it into a true granny flat, or say it's a caretaker or somebody like that. The other is that while the state and our current and proposed ordinance require that at least one of the units be owner occupied, if the owner, for instance, wanted to live in the ADU and rent out their house instead, the house would not be subject to that requirement. So it would just be the ADU, and it would really just be for rent-paying non-family members.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, then may I have a motion and a second to introduce by title only and waive further reading an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, amending Section 10802 of Chapter 6 of Article 10 of the Port Hueneme Municipal Code pertaining to development standards for accessory dwelling units, which will approve application number PHA 852 and take such additional related action that may be desirable. Get a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you please call roll call?
Councilmember Gama,
Yes.
Councilmember Rollins,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hernandez.
Yes.
And Mayor Berg.
Yes. Thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, business items number 7. We'll now move on to the Finance Department, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB statement. Number 75, report on retiree health care and adopt other post-employment benefits, OPEB funding policy.
Mayor and Council, as Ken is making his way forward, to give you just a quick summary of this, you'll recall that we decided back in the fall of 2017, November of 2017, I think is when the council took the action to start tackling this issue that you're hearing more and more about at League of California Cities and all the seminars, which is unfunded liability for pension, future pension costs, and future retiree health care costs. Fortunately, Port Hueneme never got into the practice of providing a real generous retiree health benefit, so we don't have the kind of scary numbers that some cities are facing in terms of that long-term liability, but we do have some. So Mr. McDonald recently, which is required by law, I think every 2 or 3 years, had a new update to our actuarial study to get a firm number for what is our current unfunded liability for OPEB, which stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. And in most cases, that one item that falls under the OPEB category is retiree health insurance costs. So he's going to kind of give you a quick update on what that study showed, and then he's making a recommendation on basically starting little by little to chip away at that number now that the city's finances are turning more positive than they have, and we may have some resources available to start doing that on an annual basis. So Ken, take it from there.
Yeah, we started out, there was a new requirement that changed how the liabilities are reported to, I think it was GASB 45, and the current GASB pronouncement 75 or statement. So we had to get that done by June of 2018, so the study does that, so we've been brought current. It will have to be updated every 2 years, and they valued those liabilities on the assumption that we were going to fund them. Last year, when we contributed $500,000 to PARS for the OPEB trust, that constituted the first funding that we did towards those liabilities. So if we wouldn't have done that, the liability would have been about $4.5 million. It's a little under $4 million right now.
Are you saying that the numbers we're looking at now are as of June last year?
Yes.
Okay.
And basically, the simple way to kind of look at it is if we stopped all operations, didn't pay anybody anymore, and we were to go away, the city would be on the line for $4 million to continue paying those health benefits of current retirees and future retirees for people that are active right now.
Thank you.
I kind of have a pretty good overview of the thing, so if somebody has some general questions, I can kind of give you some guidance. There's a few sections within that OPEB report itself that kind of spell it out. The executive summary is probably the most powerful to read because it kind of summarizes the whole thing. So I'm available if anybody has any questions.
Question, Steve?
So on the actually determined present value of the projected benefits, it's, as of 7/1/2019, it says $4.1 million. Wasn't that $2 million a couple of years ago?
Under the old study method, it was a lot lower. If you look in, there was a page in there that basically listed what that liability was in 2017 and what it would have been or what it was in 2018.
Okay, I see that.
And subtracts out that $500,000. that's using the new approach. To try and explain the differences between the two GASB pronouncements, I'd direct you to the report itself, because there's a pretty good summary of how they value that and what those future liabilities are. But there was a change that would have caused that number to go up, because all we've been doing in the past was just paying what the current retiree cost of that funding was, and I think it's around $90,000 for 2018, and then it was about $297,000 for the current year that ends in June of 2019, if we want to fully fund that trust, and it shows it in there as a contribution to the OPEB trust.
Could you define the fully funded aspect of this? I know we're not, but if we were, what would it look like?
If
we're 100% funded.
It would probably be a little lower, but just to keep it simple without present value of money things, if we had contributed, say, $4.5 million last year, and we would have had this valuation done on June 2018, it would have said that we are fully funded. If we were to stop operation today, that $4.5 million that we put aside would be enough to cover those future expenses. So some of those, you want to bring that liability down, but it isn't really sometimes advantageous to bring it down to zero. There's a few agencies that had aggressively went after that from the PERS pension side. The one that I can think of is Stockton, and they actually borrowed money to bring down that liability. Well, earnings change, and those rates that you calculate what that unfunded amount is, because it's assuming there's going to be future earnings, it kind of turned a little bit different, and so they thought they were being aggressive in funding it, and now they end up with these large debt payments that they have to make, and their unfunded liability with PERS goes up because they have a set return on those investments, and they've been moving those down, which means that that value will go up. So if we didn't fund these OPEBs, the next report that we'd have in 2 years would be a lot higher, because they give us a higher rate of return because we're putting money aside and investing it, so we should have investment earnings on that, and so they let us have a higher rate of return. I think it was 7.5 in this. It listed in that report, but if you don't fund those, then you get a lower rate of return because you have no assets that are earning any interest.
Any interest on that, yeah. Okay, any other questions? Steve?
So, I recall when the trust agreement was entered into, I could be totally wrong, but I believe I heard a unfunded liability of 18 million, and that we had 4 million in the trust. Is that?
It's never been over 4 million for this other post-employment. That could be some of the PERS side, which I think Tom had some questions about PERS costs. Those are usually going to be detailed, probably too much detail, in the notes of the financial statements. We haven't got 2018, but you'll have 2017 and any prior year, and it goes through those and explains what those amounts are, because you're going to have an amount for safety and an amount for miscellaneous.
So we'll have two columns of unfunded liability, one for safety and
on
one
the retirement.
On the retirement side.
Yeah, this one is other post-employment benefits, meaning everything outside of retirement.
Okay, Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, just to go further into your question, Councilmember Gama, we've been hovering between 26 and 29 million as the total long-term liability on the pension side. That includes safety and what they call miscellaneous, which are all the non-safety employees. So you've got that, that's the bigger number, and then you have retiree health care, or OPEB, which is what we're focusing on tonight. And then to answer your question, the City Council in November 2017 made an initial deposit of $2 million into our trust, our IRS-approved blessed pension and OPEB trust through PARS, which is Public Agency Retirement Services. And we're hovering right around that $2 million mark currently in terms of what the balance is. Might be a little bit over now because of interest earnings. And what our hope is, you know, and I think the staff position is that we will start adding on an annual basis, which I think is what Ken's recommending, a little bit each year to that trust, even if all we can do right now is tackle the retiree health portion. Ideally, we'll get to a point where we can start socking away a little bit for the pension side as well. But that's 2 million, a little bit over 2 million is where we stand now. And the total pension side long-term liability is 26 to 29.
So it's the funds that aren't set aside and the interest not being earned that increases that unfunded liability year after year after year. So it took me a while to learn that in my previous employment, but it was very tricky. But so when you talk about an unfunded liability, we have a couple different categories, and we need to be aware that because we don't have the funds set aside, that they're going to continue to inch up on us. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
And if we fund it to these amounts, we'll see that number drop down. I think if my memory's correct, they factor in that this will be paid back over 20, 25 years. So after 20 years of funding it every year, we will see every 2 years that liability number go down each year. And then as that PARS trust earns interest, then that will decrease it even more.
Okay, thank you.
And these unfunded liabilities and the OPEB that we talk about as well, traditionally, they hadn't been reported on the, as part of the financial statements for the city, and now, though, they have to be reported?
Yeah, I'm thinking it was maybe 2008 or 9, maybe even 7. They didn't report them at all, so they weren't anywhere on the statements, and then they started reporting what the actual expense was, which is referred in the report and other things as a pay-as-you-go, meaning you're only paying your current retiree costs, not all your future or your current employees that will future retire. You weren't accumulating anything for doing those.
Exactly.
They've tried to address that to get that in. The OPEB is a lot simpler to understand the unfunded liabilities than the PERS pension. There's a lot more moving parts in that, but it's roughly that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Rich?
Yes, and it's just, so the 2018, you have the 297,000, and then it drops for the next year. But I'm assuming that for future years, every 2 years, we're going to have to pay in, I don't know, another $200,000 or $300,000 with the goal of eventually evening it out or not. So we don't have any unfunded, and how long would that take to do that?
When we do the next valuation in 2 years, they will recalculate those amounts. So I think it was 297 and say 267 for this year and next year. When they do the next valuation for June of 2020, they'll recalculate those. They could actually come back and say, based on earnings and what's changed in the market, or if we have any negotiated changes for retiree health costs, meaning those things will go up, then those numbers could change. But for the next 2 years, those contributions will meet the definition of being fully funding. And then when the next valuation comes up, I would expect that everything else stays equal, meaning we don't pay anything more towards retiree costs. That number will decrease every year. I was kind of shocked to see it, down by 25,000 in the next 2 years, but it was the credit for the prior year's contribution of 500,000 that exceeded what that year's was, which was probably 310 or 15. I know it was a little higher, and they listed it in that report.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, can I have a motion and a second to adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, adopting a retiree health care OPEB funding policy?
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. Is this a roll call vote? Let's roll call this, please. No? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to business item number 8, our Police Department Crime and Community Activities Monthly Update. Chief Salinas, welcome.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor Pro Tem, City staff. I'm here to present our monthly crime update for the Port Hueneme Police Department. And the very first slide, I normally start out with the actual crime statistics. I'd like to really give everyone an update as to what's happening with our police officer and the condition of our officer as a result of an incident that occurred on February 10th here in the city of Port Hueneme. Many of you may have seen in the news or in social media, we had an unfortunate incident occur on that evening. Officer Gladys Rossetti had responded to a 4-vehicle traffic collision there on Ventura Road between Clara and Pleasant Valley Road. During this time, she had to have one of the vehicles towed, and the tow truck driver had to ask for the street to be closed because he had to drive in the opposite side of traffic in order to pull the vehicle the way he did here. So 2 officers closed the street with Officer Rossetti standing by with a tow truck. The tow operator pulled the vehicle up onto the flatbed. It unexpectedly unhooked or the vehicle came rolling down the flatbed, struck the officer, and drug her underneath the vehicle there that you see. And had it not been for the parked vehicle that you see it ultimately collide with, we definitely would have had a very serious tragedy in our hands. So we were very fortunate in that respect. As you can see what our officer looks like. She was made famous in our lip sync video last year as one of our headliners, and that's her department photo there that you see on my right. She is off of work. She had no broken bones and was released from the hospital later that evening, fortunately, but she's still undergoing a number of examinations to make sure that she doesn't have any other injuries, and she'll be off for some time right now. And so that leaves us with 1 officer on long-term disability along with Officer Rossetti and 3 vacancies. So right now we have 5 vacancies on our 22-man police department, which is quite significant. And we'll start actually mandating officers here in the next few weeks to start working overtime because of these vacancies. So here we move on to our crime statistics for the month of January in 2019. It was a okay month in terms of, actually a very good month in terms of violent crime. No homicides, no robberies, 1 rape, which I believe was a child molest, and 3 aggravated assaults. 1 was a brandishing, 1 was a shooting with a firearm in the 2500 block of Spinnaker, and 1 was a domestic violence assault. So that accounted for our 4 violent crime. And then, unfortunately, property crime is still a challenge for us, especially in the larceny category, and simply getting people to lock their vehicles. So as we compare to last year already, we have 2 fewer crimes than last year, and ultimately that's a 1% decrease. But as you can see, violent crime is down 60% as compared to last year for the month. As last year we had 10 violent crime as opposed to the 4 that we had this year. Moving on from our crime statistics, this is just a breakdown of that larceny category that I explained is very challenging for us and where it's happening. 8 of the 29 are theft from vehicles, and actually 5 of those are from 1 incident where 1 subject went to the Anacapa View Beach Homes and proceeded to enter 5 unlocked vehicles in that same complex all in 1 evening. And so that accounts for 5 crimes, which is 1.5% of our total crime for the year. So that just goes to show you how people can have an impact on our crime rate if they would just lock their vehicles and secure their personal property. And then this actually accounts for the actual percentages, which is 28% of our crime for this past month came from theft from vehicles. And then you'll see license plates. When your automobile theft rate goes up, so do the theft of license plates, because thieves will take cold license plates, is what we call them, and put them on the stolen vehicles, because it's people who drive their vehicles, sometimes they don't notice their license plates missing, and so it takes longer for them to be reported, and it gives them a little bit more time to be driving around in that stolen vehicle. So these are some of the photos that we posted on social media to get the public's assistance in identifying some of these crimes that we have had during the month of January. The one to my left is a porch pirate, is what we call them. And the picture was pretty good, along with his vehicle there, which was a 2009 to 2012 Ford SUV with a tow hitch and a missing rear hubcap. The lady in the middle there was involved in a burglary of a vehicle where she stole a purse and then proceeded to try and use a credit card just an hour later in the early morning hours at one of our local gas stations. And then the gentleman on my right, as you can see, is burglarizing one of the machines at one of our laundromats and is using a device to access the machines. And they had very good video camera system, and we were able to post all these pictures on social media asking for the public's assistance.
Any results?
Not yet. Not yet, but in previous postings we've been very successful with this, and that's why we continue to post these. So stolen vehicles. While during the month of January we only had 6, and it didn't come across as a real problem because as a city we generally average between 3 and 5 a month, the city of Oxnard is going through some very tough times as it relates to stolen vehicles. And to date, from January 1st to present day, they've had roughly 150 stolen vehicles out of their city. So far for the month of February, for our city, we've had 10 already. So you add that with a 6 from the previous month, we're up to 16. So we're starting to get some of that to leak over in our community. But what I delineated here is to show everyone is some of these could have been prevented. As you can see, 3 of them, or 2 of them, had their vehicles running when this occurred. Another one had their vehicle unlocked and their keys are unaccounted for. And then another one involved an employee, which is most likely more of an embezzlement than it is anything else. If we take this a step further, many of these vehicles that are highlighted in orange are on the top 10 list of vehicles stolen in the state of California because of their, we'll say, they're the easiest vehicles to steal right now, mainly because of their ignitions, and they're very easy to override. So if we go here and we look at the National Insurance Crime Bureau, they do list these vehicles as the top vehicles stolen in the state of California. So we decided to take it a step further and do what we could to help prevent this. So I contacted the National Insurance Crime Bureau. I had a meeting with them today, and they are donating 200 steering wheel locks for our residents. So we are going to be distributing them to anyone who's been a crime victim, and they own one of these top 10 stolen vehicles. And so they'll just come in and we'll give it to them for free if they've already had a vehicle stolen. This is to prevent it from occurring again. And anyone that comes to our police department and shows they own one of these vehicles and shows us that they're a resident of Port Hueneme, we will also be giving them a free steering wheel column lock. So that's what it looks like. People know it as the club, and hopefully this helps deal with this wave that we're currently dealing with in our city. So we talked about motor vehicle thefts and theft from vehicles, actually, both of them. And so what we are doing is we are putting a community crime alert out. And this Saturday, our police explorers are going to be going door to door to pass out these flyers in those communities that are most affected and need a little more inspiration or education on what is happening in our community. It is both in English and in Spanish. And along with passing this out, they'll also be passing out some information on some future events that we have coming up in our city, which include our Drug Prescription Take-Back Day, which is on Saturday, April 28th. As you can see the flyer here in English and in Spanish. We provide, on this specific date, people will be able to drive up to the front of the police station, drop off their prescription drugs, and we will go ahead and destroy those items for them. So we decided to add to that day as well, and we are going to add our free shredding event that we promise to have every year now, and it correlates now more with tax day, which is on April 15th. So 2 weeks after tax day, you can essentially take your documents, and like we did last year, we're going to provide a drive-through. We'll take the documents for you and make sure that they get professionally shredded. And so we are combining both events. And so ultimately you'll be able to drive through and drop off your prescription drugs and all of your paperwork. And we'll be doing that out here in front of the police department with the assistance of our police explorers. This past month in January, I attended the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Oxnard and Port Hueneme Youth of the Year, and I'm proud to announce that the winner is a Port Hueneme resident, Andros Michel. He actually lives in our Port Hueneme housing, and he gave a speech and was the one selected amongst four other candidates. And so as a result of winning this local event, he was awarded a $10,000 scholarship.
Wow.
He'll now be representing us in the regional and then the state if he wins the regional, and I believe he will be awarded upwards of $100,000 for a college scholarship if he's able to win every level from this point on. So it was nice to see that one of our residents who attends our local Boys and Girls Club won Youth of the Year, and so I was there to help celebrate this honor with him. So let's talk about our regional homeless shelter. Some of you may have received an email from me or from the city manager over this past week. This is the first time that I'm publicly announcing this to our community. And most recently in January, I saw an article in the VC Star about the homeless shelter opening soon. And in that article, I saw a picture with a bunch of air mattresses sitting on the floor. And I thought to myself, well, how can we help them with this? How can we be partners in this regional homeless shelter? As I know, over previous years, we have not been big contributors due to our budget situation. So this was the picture that inspired me, and so I contacted Carl Lawson, the homeless shelter, or the Oxnard Housing Director, along with Mark Alvarado, who is the homeless shelter coordinator, and asked them what we could do to assist them with this. They asked us if we could purchase some beds for the facility. And I asked him, well, how many does he need? And he said in a dream situation, it would be to totally outfit the homeless shelter with 100 beds. And so I reached out to our cannabis dispensaries, and within 2 days, I had $25,500 in donations from our cannabis dispensaries. So I contacted the manufacturer and asked them how much it would cost. The final bill was just under $35,500. So I contacted our city manager, who reminded me that we had a CBF fund, which we had $10,000 set aside for homeless issues. And I don't know how the math coincidentally ended up the way it did, but that made it $35,500 we were able to acquire, and the final bill was just over $35,000. So this Monday, on a 53-foot semi-truck and trailer, we are having delivered to our Oxnard Regional Homeless Shelter 100 beds to outfit their facility, which will also increase their occupancy rate because they're bunk beds, which creates more surface area. So now they are going to be requesting from the fire department and the city itself to see if they can actually bring in more homeless people now from that original 100. So we're very excited that we are now big players or partners in our regional homeless shelter. And I am very much looking forward to this Monday date where we plan on sharing this day with the media and letting everyone know that the city of Port Hueneme and their cannabis dispensaries of what they've done already. And then also to really give some notoriety to our port, who provided obviously some of this money through the Community Benefit Fund. So they should also be acknowledged for assisting us with these efforts. So these are pictures of the beds that we purchased and the amounts of the contributors, which was, there are 5 different dispensaries, as you can see the dollar amounts there. And with the $10,000 CBF money, that equates to the $35,500. So we have many of these dispensaries to thank for their contributions. And I will be sending out an official press release tomorrow to all of the media, letting them know about this date. I mentioned in my previous monthly update about our Cannabis Community Educational Forum. Here's the official flyer. This event will be on March 28th, and we will be inviting people in our community along with other dignitaries throughout the county who are very much interested to see how cannabis is faring in our community. I plan on answering many questions and giving a very comprehensive report of what cannabis has done for our community over this past year. We also plan on having representatives from the BCC present during this presentation, as we will conclude the forum with an actual panel, expert panel, question and answer expert panel for our community. We plan on providing free dinner to everyone attending, as to get as many people there as possible on this Thursday evening. I know Mayor Pro Tem Laura Hernandez will be happy to see this. We applied to the County of Ventura for a grant, and we obtained $12,500 to update our emergency operations plan. And so the police department will be updating our plan over the next 6 months for the entire city, and some of it will be paid through this grant we obtained through the County of Ventura. So that concludes my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions or comments?
I have a few comments. Thank you, Chief Salinas. I very much appreciate your proactive approach to law enforcement in our community and your forward thinking in everything you do. There was a time when we were talking about the recycling bin over here where the CVS Market is going to go, and the fact that we were moving that would have the effect of moving homeless people out of our city, and we were doing some other things too that was essentially moving people, moving homeless residents out of the city. And I began to wonder, are we pushing our problem on other cities? So to know that you've taken the initiative to provide the beds and to arrange those beds to be delivered to the homeless shelter just goes to show that we are now a contributing partner, and we're not just, pushing it off on another city. We're actually helping be part of the solution. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And on top of that, I've invited all of our dispensaries to be present who donated, and I know many of them, once seeing the facility, will want to do a lot more.
Good. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Chief, sorry, I just came back from actually teaching a class over at Oxnard College. That's my duty on Tuesday night, so when these meetings move to Tuesday, I have to juggle the day. Did you talk about the Homeland Security and what happened at the port within the last month? Was that part of your presentation tonight? Were you involved at all, or was our police department involved at all?
Our police department was not involved.
Okay.
If you're speaking about the drug seizure?
Right.
Yes, we were not involved with that.
Okay. All right. Just wondering.
That's okay.
Thanks.
Rich?
This may be more of a legal question. While my first concern is that the police officer who was injured will have a complete recovery, obviously that has created a big cost to the city. Does the towing agency have any insurance or anything like that to cover the damages? At least from what I picked up, like somebody didn't put the hook on right or whatever and it fell back.
The city, as you know, has insurance through the California Joint Insurance Authority, and they will be providing such coverage as applies, and to the extent that we have any costs out of pocket, they will seek reimbursement from any third parties who have liability. Okay. That's just a standard operating procedure.
Thank you.
Steve?
I'm really thankful that the officer is good.
Thank you.
The evening it happened, I heard a commotion and and then I started seeing information on social media. So I ran over here and was able to talk to an Oxnard police officer. So I got real good quality information, and I started sharing that information because the rumor out of the gate was an officer was hit by a car. Technically it's true, but
Right.
circumstances were a little different. So I think it's real important for us to, when things like this occur, is to get accurate information out as quickly as possible. So I appreciate that. And then always after the accident, you know, I've been involved in risk management for a long time, handled many, many injuries like this. So what did we learn from this? And I think we've learned where to stand during a car being picked up. So I just would like to hear a little bit on that. And one other thing is, where is the meeting on the 28th of March at 7 p.m.?
It'll be at the Orving Carpenter.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Good. Chief, thank you very much. You continue to amaze me every time you come up here with something new like this. Your proactive approach is just great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, move on to item 9, municipal code updates.
That's nice.
All right, thank you again, Mayor, members of council. So this is part 2 of my discussion for the evening, where we're currently in the midst of doing a development code update or municipal code update. Originally, we had brought forward through a couple of workshops last year with the former council a list of zoning ordinance, proposed zoning ordinance amendments. And after getting input from the council members at the 2 workshops, staff is now putting together everything. It was unanimously approved, all of the recommendations, so we're moving forward with that. A second component of that was to also bring forward a new property maintenance ordinance / code enforcement procedures. This was tried a couple of years ago before most any of us here were part of the party, so to speak, and it didn't go very well due to different factions. All of the players, for the most part, except for Councilmember Schnapp, were not here to participate in that, and it didn't go very well, and so we are pretty much where we were back then currently. So what we're looking to do is also, again, have that discussion to try to streamline and make our code compliance requirements more black and white, basically, and less subject to interpretation and whatnot, both not only for staff, but also for the community to follow. However, it is quite an undertaking, so instead of trying to do everything at once, we're looking at bifurcating the process a little bit and bring the zoning ordinance amendments first, minus the ADU requirements, because we just took care of those, and then bring the property maintenance to you and the community at a later time. Probably May for the zoning ordinance and June, July for the property maintenance and code compliance ordinances. What I'm asking for this evening, though, is a little bit of direction from you. First of all, with regard to the actual zoning ordinance amendments, did you want to discuss those through another workshop, or did you want to just move them on to the public hearing forum? Keep in mind that we had those workshops previously. They were held in the evening to get the public's input. We had one member of the public at one of the workshops and pretty much nobody at the rest of them. So, but we still got through everything, and so at this point, like I said, I'm putting together everything to move forward to you. But again, my question is, did you want to have another workshop or just move that forward to the public hearing?
You guys got some ideas? Steve?
We're going to go through the whole ordinance. I mean, every ordinance on the books. So, for example, we talked earlier about coral trees and tree removal. Is that a part of the list?
We do have landscape standards that will be addressed. There are certain aspects that will not be addressed. For instance, we're not proposing any changes to any of our development standards. So, with regard to setbacks, densities and whatnot, none of that's proposed to be changed. But we do have basically recommended revisions to the sign ordinance, parking standards for commercial uses, some landscape standards again, with regard to the actual development. Now, the actual code compliance, that's the second question I'll have for you here shortly, because I do think that we do need to have at least one, if not more, workshops to really vet out the issues there. So, again, the first question is, do we want to have another workshop just for the zoning ordinance, or move that forward? And then the second would be, how many workshops do you think we need? At least one or two, and did you want them in the evening or during the day?
I would just like to know what the ordinances are and what the zoning criteriums are, so that at least we could, maybe one of us or all of us would say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me. Could you explain this to me? And then carry on the process. And as it, in regards to the tree issue, that's something that I'm interested in, because something that comes up in all our HOAs and surrounding areas. So again, I'd like to, there's a question, is there an ordinance on the books that deals with tree removal, or is it just a rumor?
There is a, I will say that there is one, but it's not a very, it doesn't have a whole lot of teeth to it, let's put it that way. So what we'd be looking to do as part of this whole landscape upgrade, in addition to bring us into compliance with state drought-tolerant landscaping requirements and whatnot, is to actually address tree removals and tree removal permits as part of that.
Okay. Laura.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your work and your being here tonight. My question, it sounds, I had a question regarding the workshops. It sounds like you have a recommendation, although you're asking us whether or not we want workshops.
Correct.
Okay, so my preference would be that we move ahead with the public hearing process under the conditions that we make sure that our community is notified about what's going to be discussed. I imagine you have a process for doing that.
We do. There would be public hearing notices, for instance, and basically at least minimum 1/8 page advertisements in the paper, which is similar to what we did for this evening's ADU ordinance, because it does address it's citywide. Circling back again, so I would still recommend at least one workshop for the property maintenance standards, just based on the history and the fact that there are a lot of opinions with regard to property maintenance and what should be allowed in the front yard, for instance, what shouldn't. So separate of the zoning ordinance, I would certainly recommend that, again, to involve the public.
I could support that.
I could support that too, and I'm sorry I wasn't clear in what my thinking is, but I think that we all need to have a chance to review all the applicable ordinances before a workshop, so that we could be prepared.
Come in with some ideas and opinions, maybe. Sylvia?
So it sounds, thank you, Mr. Stewart. So it really sounds like we're picking up from where the ball got dropped last time around, and now we have new players on the team here. And so it sounds like what Councilmember Gem is looking for is maybe a study session or something that brings everyone up to speed with what we do have, and then there's possibly then, you know, we bring it back as either a workshop or a public hearing, but knowing that these are the elements, this is what we're looking at in the entirety, and maybe breaking it up into the sections that we need to review. Another idea is to handle it through a subcommittee work, where there'd be two of us working with you and city manager to handle this as well. I mean, we can do it that way as well. So just quite a few options. What's best?
He's asking
know?
us for our direction.
What's best, right?
So,
well, depending on, you know, working with Mr. Butler and Mr. Green and our city clerk here, maybe we can look at the study session where we at least sit down as a group and go over what has been discussed previously and where we are with regard to the zoning ordinance update. With the property maintenance, we could also do that, or what we could do, which is what we did prior to the past workshops, is I put together a PowerPoint presentation with recommended revisions and whatnot, and things to discuss, items of topics of discussion. And that gets out to you ahead of time, basically, and we could, instead of just having it on Thursday before, we could, make that several weeks out, for instance, or at least a couple weeks, and give you time to look at that before we go into the workshop, so that you do have some ideas for discussion on those property maintenance items.
And what you did for us last time around was very helpful. So having that in advance and having it on PowerPoint is a really good idea.
So what I could do then is I will work with Mr. Butler, Mr. Green, and our city clerk with regard to a study session for the zoning ordinance updates, and decide if we want to have another workshop at that point, or just move forward with the actual public hearing, and then separately go ahead and work with, get that information out to you for workshops for the property maintenance.
Yeah, I kind of like the workshop format myself, and we can just open things up and really just see what we have to look at. And so I'd like to recommend that we consider a workshop.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, it's a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Sounds like it's unanimous. I won that one.
Right. And so, Mr. Stewart, before we even took a look at that, sometime earlier last year, when was the last time we actually updated and upgraded all of this? Do you know?
It's always ongoing, but it's been quite a while.
Like quite a while, meaning like over
Like
5
before
years,
your
over
time.
10, over
Over
20?
5 years. All of the above, basically.
Right.
Some of the standards are fairly old. Us being built out, some of the standards, again, don't need to change. But to be more business friendly, to bring us into compliance with the state requirements, there are certain revisions that we're looking at. So just for clarification then, are we talking a no study session then, and just workshops, or did we want the study session for the?
Well, the workshop study session to me means it's the same cat. But let's have a workshop before we would have our public meeting where we really, the workshop obviously is open to everybody to come in, and we need to advertise that as much as possible. But then we'll have a more formal meeting to actually make some decisions.
And one final question then is afternoons or evenings? We went with evenings last time to try to get the public in here.
Mhm.
Is that something that we still want to do? Either way, I will go ahead and shoot out some, as we get closer, some dates and times to look at. But
I think we're
My
okay with the
suggestion
evenings,
is
yeah.
evening,
Evenings.
yeah, if we want to
Evening,
draw
please.
the community.
Okay.
Good.
So we'll go ahead and do that.
All right.
And I'll
Got
follow
enough?
up with y'all. Yep. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks.
All right. Move on to business item number 10, which is a approval of an application for the California Energy Commission loan for energy efficiency projects. So you're going to put us in debt? We're going to go out and borrow money or something?
We may.
Explain
Yeah,
yourself to them.
All right. It's kind of a bittersweet moment, but here in what may be one of her last
That's right.
staff meeting, or council presentations, staff reports, is Ms. Linda Catherine Lee, and she's been the team leader from the staff side on this whole NG energy efficiency project. So she's going to kind of walk you through the introduction, and then we have some guests from NG tonight who may be speaking as well.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, honorable council members, City Manager Butler, City Attorney Green, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to report back to you the status of the citywide turnkey energy services program. I'm really excited about this program. I had an opportunity to put something like this in my last city, and we are making tremendous progress. Not as only in compliance with AB 32 and SB 375, but this is something good for the community here at City of Port Hueneme. So just by way of background, back in July 2018, the City Council provided a program development agreement with NG Service to conduct a truly integrated energy assessment and identified energy conservation measures. Throughout the August-September timeframe, NG and the consultant team members have been quite visible throughout the City Hall and city facilities, really looking at all aspects of energy conservation where we can. And the assessment was completed in late September. Attached to your City Council staff report is a comprehensive attachment A, which is the report describing and identifying various measures to energy efficiency where the city can move forward to. So in a nutshell, the program is designed in many stages. We have to first identify programs where we can have measurable energy conservations. Then we have to start looking at financing options and identifying what is the most cost-effectiveness way of managing this program moving forward. So the second step of this program is to report back to your council of the status. NG this afternoon will be presenting a status report of the recommended areas of energy efficiency programs. We are asking your council to approve the attached resolutions authorizing the city manager to submit an application with the California Energy Commission in the amount of not to exceed $1.1 million. I will go into the fiscal impacts after the presentations by NG. So at this time, I'd like to turn over the presentations to NG Energy Program Managers, Mr. Anthony Lamino, who's going to be talking about the programs itself, and then I will be returning back to talk to you about the fiscal impact of this potential loan application.
I thought you were going to do the whole thing. Mr. Mayor, council members, staff, thank you very much. My name is Anthony Lamino. I'm going to call myself Anthony because you have another Tony here. So I'm going to be Anthony tonight. I'm with NG Services. And as was described, we were hired by the city to investigate energy efficiency. And I also want to emphasize facility improvement opportunities throughout the city and see how through energy efficiency we can address capital improvement needs. There we go. Just very quickly for some of the new council members, NG Services, who we are, we're a national contracting firm that has specialized in energy efficiency projects through a design-build model. We've been doing this for over 40 years, strong presence in California and specifically in the public sector, so that's cities, counties, municipalities, and school districts. Our goals are your goals, which is to identify those opportunities, and we call them energy effectiveness. It's what's the human impact of improving facilities and facility operations? What's the fiscal impact? How can we do this through an energy savings program model? And then also the sustainability through either city goals or laws that are imposed on cities, such as in California. There is a goal and a driver to reduce your greenhouse gases, your carbon footprint, if you will. We combine all of this, and again, in one comprehensive sustainable program. Very quickly, the ESCO model and the benefits to a city, where you have an energy services company that provides, again, the design build services. We look at a bundle of solutions and a bundle of technologies, where you might want to put out to bid, for instance, the infrastructure of a new water line or a new sewer line or storm drains or sidewalks or streets. What we look at here is we look at a building as an energy consuming entity in itself, and all of the energy systems, from the lighting to the air conditioning to the heating when it's on, to air conditioning, to other energy consuming components of the building, and of all of your facilities and your assets. These are your assets that the city has to offer. Part of the program is to look at, again, a comprehensive solution, identifying these opportunities, sitting down with staff and reviewing what those findings are, and does it make sense for the city and the city's needs. Start with a blank sheet of paper. The city will get positive benefits from the program. Those are the improvements, that's energy efficiency, those are comfortable buildings. They're inviting buildings too in some areas. In some cases where the parks may not have adequate lighting and becomes a safety concern, we look at not just making the parks energy efficient from a lighting standpoint, but are there dark areas? Do we need to improve the infrastructure and address safety concerns all at the same time? So again, the comprehensive nature. And as an energy services company in the model, part of the program and the concept of the program is that the energy savings that we will generate and create from the implementation of these projects will be a funding source to help pay for the project. You pay this much of the utility bill every year. We're going to reduce that by a certain amount, but some of that savings is going to go to pay for the capital investment that's going to be required for the project. A paid from savings program, if you will. So we've done that. We started that with the city last year. We've mostly completed the program development phase of this three-phase process. We're at the bottom of that list in the program development, which is after identifying and working on a co-authored scope of needs for the city. Again, lighting, air conditioning system, roofs, those kind of things. Now we have half the score. We know what the facilities need. We know what the city needs. Where are we going to find the funding? So what we're here tonight to talk about is identifying some of those funding sources, okay? We will come back and talk about implementation and talk about ongoing services. The key now is to find, is to capture all the funding. Under the project development, what we've identified are these measures, and some of them are very general in category, but I'll explain them. It's energy efficiency lighting throughout the city, interior, exterior, automated controls, looking at some of the street lights, the city-owned street lights, converting those to LED, much lower maintenance than what it is now, very energy efficient and very and higher lighting quality. Looking at air conditioning, HVAC upgrades throughout the city, looking at the roofs as well. As we're up on the roof looking at replacing air conditioning systems, the rooftop units, we get into the roof, and in the roofs in your facilities, it's time. It's time for them to be addressed. And then also categorically looking at Mar Vista Apartments, at the building itself. I'm sure the residents right now on a cold night like tonight would appreciate better windows, better doors. It's a little leaky over there. And then some other improvements to the parks. Now we've categorized these in terms of energy efficiency. So a lighting upgrade, yeah, the lights work, but they could be more efficient. That's a pure energy efficiency type project. To something like in renewable energy, that is, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. That's photovoltaics, that's PV systems, generate electricity at some of the city facilities. But then CIP is capital improvement projects. Those are projects where the cost of implementing that project exceeds the savings that you'll see. So something like the Mar Vista, the windows and doors to the patio doors. That is a very significant capital improvement project. Yes, you will see some energy savings and obviously some increased comfort, but it tends to be more of a capital improvement and capital improvement driven than we're going to save a little bit on the heating bill. Okay, so that's how we sort of categorize some of those type of projects. In this environment, Port Hueneme, HVAC also falls into that category. You know, you just don't use a lot of cooling in the summertime here. You're somewhat blessed by a nice, nice climate here. But still, when you do need it, the air conditioning systems are old. So that's why we have it categorized, and well, it should be an X under energy efficiency, but that's why it's sort of duly categorized, if you will. That was half the story. What does the city need through this investment grade energy audit? Now we're going to start talking about where are we going to find the funding. Multiple funding sources, we look at them all. Of course, we look at rebates and incentives through the utility company, and there are some, but there's just not that much. But there is some, and we'll capture it. I'm going to skip over the California Energy Commission loan. I'm going to come back to that. But looking at the HUD grant, those improvements, and working with your housing authority, those improvements that were identified at Mar Vista, there are HUD grants available for that. So that will be part of the funding solution, if you will. There's a potential for city funds and for things like roofs and roofing replacements. That might be required. You're going to have to do it anyway. These roofs aren't going to just get better by themselves. And then there's another element here too, and that's a third-party lender. So where we're talking to you and the council about a CEC loan, a low-interest loan, there are also third-party lenders who loan cities money for energy efficiency projects, and they're paid out over a long period of time. That is an option as well. Again, we're going to be bringing all of these options together, sitting down with staff, and understanding, well, what's the best mix? What's the best solution here, if you will? Now, focusing a little bit on the California Energy Commission, and as part of the board packet, part of the requirements are, as the application, is to identify those projects that would be a part of the application. Now, if you look through these, you'll see the lighting, interior, exterior, street lights, air conditioning, and the solar PV systems. And it doesn't take much to figure out that, hey, that's $2 million, and we're talking about an amount of approval up to 1.1 million. What's the disparity here? The difference is this. The CEC, when they look at their loans and their loan applications, they will limit the funding amount on certain projects depending on some of the characteristics of the projects. For instance, air conditioning systems. They will only, HVAC systems, they will only loan up to a 15-year simple payback. And you see there, it's a 270-year simple payback. So they will not loan you the full amount for those HVAC upgrades, but they will loan you a partial amount up to that 15-year simple payback criteria. Now the difference is where we have to work hard to find, is it SCE rebates? Are there other grants, or are there other opportunities to find funding, again, to complete the funding picture, if you will. But this becomes part of the application and the application process. It will probably be discussed again, but I just want to point out a couple of highlights of the California Energy Commission loan. The program has been, I forget now when it was started, but the purpose for the loan program is to allow cities, regardless of a city's financial condition or outlook or horizon, to invest, to borrow low interest money to invest in these exact kind of projects. Many cities have done this, and currently, and it's a revolving fund. Currently, the fund has about $14 million, which, as I've been tracking and applying for this, is the highest amount that I've ever seen, and there's nobody on the waiting list, which means that we get our application in, it gets reviewed, and then we'll get, the city will get approval of the loan application. The city has that opportunity to go forward with the loan, or the city can also decide not to go forward with the loan. And there are no consequences. There's no recourse, there's no fee, there's no application fee. The only thing that they really require is this kind of a public hearing and a resolution pass, so there is a level of commitment from a city to make that application, to put forth that application. What we're trying to accomplish here is, again, we've identified the needs, and we're looking for, and we're identifying the funding solutions to be able to bring forth a comprehensive funded project to the council. Looking forward, again, if approved tonight, we'll apply for the loan. I'm sorry, the city will apply for the loan. We won't do it, the city, we facilitate it. We'll look for additional funding sources over a period of time based on the funding that we can capture and the cash flow, if you will. Come back to we'll identify those measures, come back to the city council with here's the picture, here are the needs, here's the funding sources, this is what it's all going to look like. And then should the city decide to move forward, then there will be a design build agreement or a design build agreement, with NG Services. You'll then have to agree to the loan with the CEC, and then if there is any other third-party loans, you'll agree to those loans. And then once the funding is secured, you have us as your design builder secured, then we roll into the design build and the implementation of the project itself. So with that, are there any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. The, say, the 1.1 that we're applying for, is that like a line of credit? Like, these are the projects that we want to potentially utilize that money, but can we stagger, depending on the city finances, can we stagger that? Do we only pay for the portion that we're actually borrowing? I know you said we're not penalized for not using it, but is there some kind of a staggering situation? And is this like a line of credit, and how long does the line of credit last for, kind of?
The way it works is when we make that application, we're designating, the city would be, and the CEC would be approving that list, a very specific list of projects. And the way it would typically work is once the cities sign the agreement, the money essentially goes into escrow. It's earmarked for the city. And it's based on a reimbursement basis. So the city actually would have to incur costs, and then you ask for reimbursement back to the CEC to get reimbursed for it. Okay, so there's no city investment dollar-wise. You get reimbursed. And then after a period of time, and usually it's established in the loan agreement, 12 months usually, then the city will then have to start to repay that loan based on over a period of 20 years. Okay? And what I failed to mention is to really emphasize, or I mentioned, but to really emphasize, when we're looking at some of these projects, some of the, for instance, the lighting, we want to make sure that the savings that you're seeing from the lighting more than covers the cost of that repayment associated with the lighting back for the loan. So you'll see in your general fund savings through the electric budget, through the SCE budget. And those funds then can go towards repayment of this loan.
Okay, and so what I saw was various different CIP projects that probably would not fund, this energy savings would not fund. Mm-hmm. And maybe there'll be more ones that come on board that the city council feels are important to the community. Can they be added, or is that a whole new process? Or, for example, like, I'll give you an example, like the softball lights at Miranda Park, which are no longer.
Right.
But like at one point in time, if, say, the city has the available resources or makes a decision that, in fact, we want to make that field operational at night, if it's not included on this list of things, is it not eligible, or can we add to it at a later date, kind of?
Okay, so in regards to the actual CEC loan, things like an improvement, if you will, to add lights, to bring lights back to the tennis courts and the infrastructure required, would not. That specifically would not, because the CEC loan is the purpose of it is to help fund energy conservation projects. However, we've identified that at the parks there are some energy efficiency work that can be done, some lights that are inefficient, and we can improve the air conditioning systems that can be improved, that would get funded by the program. So it's going to be up to us to really delineate those things and make it very clear what the CEC funds can be used for and what they can't be used for, and what that gap is, and then to find those sources of funds for that gap. So it's very specific on what these projects are as they apply to the CEC, and what the CEC will then look at our invoices as the design build contractor to the city and match that up with what is approved. And they have to be energy efficiency projects. They can't be capital improvement projects. Hope that I made that clear and answered the question.
So basically, none of the capital improvement projects could be included as part of that CEC loan?
Yes. Yep, correct. Only the energy efficiency.
Steve?
This is very timely today. Or actually, a week or two, I noticed that in Miranda Park, the old yellow lights are disappearing, and I guess LED lights are being installed. And I walk through that park a lot at night, and the difference is amazing. I mean, you can really see it just lights up, but I took a picture. I wish I could show it to you right now, because it's so it's really nice. So my understanding is that we're going to save money by putting the more expensive LED lights in. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the LED lights, while they're more expensive, they last for a longer time and they're energy efficient, so in theory they pay for themselves, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're already doing this at Miranda Park without a loan?
Mhm.
Is that correct?
I think there are some.
Yeah, Don Villafana and his team in Public Works have taken the initiative on that park lighting. They had budgeted some money for lighting upgrades, and the LED is becoming such a accepted way of moving forward, saving energy costs over time and getting and improving the lighting in the process, that Don went ahead and did that outside of this program. But that's what you're seeing happening, is they had some money budgeted for this, and they've gone ahead and done it on a pay-as-you-go.
So this program then is designed to address all our lighting deficiencies citywide at once. Is that correct?
Correct. This program is designed to address citywide energy efficiency program. And we appreciate the proactiveness of our leadership team here under city managers and public works directors. But we think this energy efficiency program can truly benefit the entire community if we're looking at in totality. And seeking loans, grants, opportunities, we can really come back to the council with a design implementation phases once we secure all of those funding opportunities, so that we can really design a long-term program to manage this program collectively.
Is it correct to say that if we, as a council, decide tonight, go out and replace all the non-LED lightings with LED lightings, we wouldn't have a budget for it? It would be very expensive. That's what my understanding is. Is that correct?
Right, and that's the value of this loan program, is the money is so inexpensive at 1%, and they've designed it that way for a reason, that we can fund a larger, more comprehensive effort than what we could just pay out of available funds now. And a little bit of interest, but at 1%, it's very reasonable.
And then just one other question, comment. So the yellow street lights will be a thing of the past? Because they too have that yellow high energy usage lamp in it, similar to what the park was, which is, in fact, before coming over here tonight, they were doing the last 3 lights next to my house. So.
Correct. So, and the way it works is the city owns some of those street lights. So those will be changed out as a part of this program to LED, which is a brighter, more clear,
white
coverage light. But then also SCE owns the other street lights in the city, and at the same time we'll put in the request for the SCE to go through and change theirs. And there will also be a savings on the utility bill. So you'll see some energy savings on those utility bill that you essentially rent from the utility company, and then we'll do the ones that the city owns. So you'll see improved lighting, energy efficiency. But when it comes to street lights, it's the maintenance benefit, and then also the parks as well. They go 20,000, 25,000, actually longer hours before they need to be maintained. So. As opposed to almost every other year, you've got to change them out with the yellow lights.
Sylvia?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm looking at let's see, Appendix B, electric vehicle charging benchmarks. And so this falls outside of all the categories, it sounds like, with the pie chart and all, and is it something that we may want to continue leaving on our list and possibly taking a look at an alternative way of getting this done?
Yeah, I actually have some really exciting news that I haven't, it's such breaking news.
Okay, thank you.
And it has nothing to do with the Mueller investigation, so.
Nor CNN?
No CNN breaking news. Don Villafana, through just kind of a fluke, it's an organization called the Gordian Group that we do group purchasing through. They basically go out and do group bids for different construction work, and then we, rather than having to go out and do bids ourselves, we can piggyback on that large group bidding process that the Gordian Group has done. They have some program now, and I don't know where they're getting their money, but they're basically providing free electric vehicle charging stations to cities and other public entities. So Don has, I've already given him the green light to pursue it. I think we get 3 under this program. Don's vision would be 1 at City Hall, 1 at the library, and I'm blanking out on the third. Yeah, the community center. Okay, so 2 up in the park, our park facilities there. So it looks like we're going to finally, I know that's been a desire of council for a long time to have some publicly available vehicle charging stations. And we had talked to the NG team when this whole thing first started to see if we could incorporate that into this project. But as they found out, it's, you know, from at least from a financial standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense to include in this project. But if we can get these freebies through this Gordian Group program, we'll achieve the goal of having at least a few available. So, and we'll give you more details on that as Don continues to pursue this.
Good.
So it looks like we may have some on the way, even if they can't be incorporated into this program.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Rich?
I know that in my first meeting for the Ventura County Air Pollution Board, they were providing some kind of funding in Ventura and in Oxnard for one of these stations. And I'm not sure if that's through the Gordy thing too, or whether that's something completely different. But I know that they approved funding at 2 different locations where they paid for it all.
Yeah,
it was like 10, 15 grand each.
Yeah, they've had, for several years now, they've had some grant programs. I think it's through, I think they get state money, and then that comes to all the air pollution control districts throughout California, and they are able to, you know, distribute that to cities, county, special districts based on applications that come in. So that's another thing. If the Gordian Group option falls through, or if we want to add some additional sites beyond the 3, APCD is a great resource.
I have a question for our city manager. Are these charging stations for public use or just for city vehicle use?
I think, you know, the council
What's
could help
the-
us decide that, but I think our vision was that it would be both. So,
Okay.
you know, we get, you know, more and more residents are buying either, you know, the high-end folk from the bungalows that can afford Teslas are buying Teslas. And then, you know, Ken McDonald, he's one of the common working people. He has a Chevy Volt. So he, but yeah, the idea would be to try to make them available to the public as well.
Yeah,
I
I think that was the original thought too.
My only recommendation there would be to provide one on the other side of the city as well. On our side.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, north.
On the
north
other side
yeah.
of the tracks.
North
Yeah.
side of town.
North side.
Yeah, good point.
Rich, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, in your research and stuff like that, the concept of solar panels, are those, I know they're not, I don't know if they were included in this or not, but have they turned to be energy efficient, that there'd be a savings, or, I know there'd be a savings, is there going to be a net cost regardless?
Yes, they do make sense, and what we do is we guarantee the results and the performance of the solar projects that we install. More importantly, we look at the application and where does it make sense and does it make sense? And then we'll run through the analysis. We found some areas where it just didn't make sense within the city, although those were the areas that we had looked at initially. But then at Police Hall, Community Center, are opportunities where it does make sense. Even potentially Mar Vista Apartments, it makes sense there.
And I know some of our community centers, and maybe even City Hall, the roofing and the air conditioning have been, you know, in need of repair. What did they do to replace those? Or what kind of roofing do they do to replace those to make it energy efficient?
Sure.
At the same time as replacing the roofs that need to be replaced?
Yeah. And we definitely take a look at that, and it's a combination of finding, you know, it's the right balance of investment in an energy efficiency or a cool roof versus the long-term gain of what you're looking for, a 30-year bonded roof, if you will. And so we take that all into consideration. And now as it relates to the solar, in some of the applications, we're suggesting that the solar is one of those shade port, those big T structures, and provide shade. In other areas, we're looking at, well, like Public Works, what does it look like on the roof? And applying it there instead of, because of the vehicle traffic and the tall vehicles and things, it's just a nice open roof space, so we'll put it on the roof. And we definitely want to fix the roof before we put the solar on, so you have a system that will last for 30 years and longer. So it's a system, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I do notice that on attachment 2, you do have solar PV system. That's the high-ticket item there. We see over $1 million in project costs, but it is worth it for us to put in, right? And then thank you for mentioning the roofs. We see it more at the schools now. That, you know, Pacifica, you drive by and they have the awning over the parking area, and you know, most of them do, and I'm sure they're really, if they're investing that kind of money, I'm sure they're seeing some real gains in terms of savings. So you took a look at that, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yep. And looked at the balance between, again, like the Public Works building where you needed a new roof, and let's look at the new roof system with photovoltaics on top of it, as opposed to here, City Hall, not putting it on the roof because we don't have the space and availability for it. So just putting in carport structures, those would be the shade structures. And things, you know, we do it with school districts. We look at the parking lot, but then also the elementary schools, it's, we typically put that in the playground area so that the kids have some protection from the sun.
Yeah, okay, good.
Interesting. Any other comments or questions? I do have a speaker card from Jim Hensley. It's your turn.
Mr. Mayor, distinguished council persons, staff, and citizens, thank you for showing up on this. I kind of read about this and I got a little bit worried. I started wondering what the heck is going on. And it does sound like it might be something that's worthwhile. I mean, at first blush, we look at something and we say, wow, that's a good idea. 1% loan, but that's only 1 million. And as I get looking at it and I see a chart up here for outside loans. Now, how much is that going to cost? That's just a thought. Now, in business, normally, there's a situation where you have a cost and a return. Now, some of it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Maybe I'm not figuring it right. The heating and air conditioning situation, 271 years payback? I mean, that 271 years from now, there's going to be a lot of different systems. And I don't think those systems are going to last that long that we buy with this 271 years. Probably the quickest return, and I'm really a big fan of it, is the LED street lights. That's going to take 13 years for a payback. We look at exterior lighting, upgrade, 39 years, 40 years actually. Solar PV systems, 30 years. 30 years from now, it's going to be a whole different world, guys. I mean, think about it. Technology is changing exponentially. I would suggest, and at first blush, a lot of us sit down and we think this would sound like a good idea, but this alone kind of worried me. So consequently, and I'm thinking back to the situation where we had an RO system. I don't see a light here. I'm trying to figure out my time.
Don't worry about your time.
Okay.
Just go ahead and talk.
Thank you, sir. We borrowed, I don't know how many $1 million for a reverse osmosis system. And I think we're still paying something like $15 million or is still owed on it. I'm not positive what it is, but somewhere around that way. and it's out of date. Every one of these projects within this living document, by the time it's paid off, it's way out of date. Many of them will have to replace 2 or 3 times over. So what I suggest that the council take a deep consideration, sit back, table this temporarily, have time to really research this out to see if it's worthwhile for the investment. Because we just started getting some money in. When I first got on the council 4 years ago, we're on the verge of bankruptcy. Now we're not. But do we want to go out and just throw bushels of money away? Do we want to go in deep in debt? I don't think so. So that's my comments. Please consider them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have any response?
Yeah, I think that, you know, as we mentioned earlier, we'll be coming back with the full financing program at a future meeting so that some of those concerns that were mentioned by Mr. Hensley could be addressed before the council gives a final buy-in on the whole project. But we think that the specifics of this loan, this Energy Commission loan, because of the low interest rate and the simplicity of the program, it makes sense to authorize us to go ahead and make the loan application, which is really all the council's being asked to do tonight, because we think the overall benefits of some of these projects that have been listed in the overall project make sense. You know, even though the payback looks long in some cases, we're getting, in some cases, very real energy savings. In other cases, capital improvements that we know need to be done anyway, the roofing and the HVAC. You know, we're gonna, one way or the other, we've got to take care of some of those roofs and some of those systems at our major facilities. So this is a way to make that happen while doing energy efficiency at the same time. So we think, you know, again, with a narrow focus tonight of just the loan, that it's a quality program that allows us to have a piece of the overall funding pie should the council choose to go forward with the whole program.
I just have one question for you, Mr. Butler. Can you explain that simple payback column to us then?
Yeah, so that's, I'm going to take a stab at it, and then I'm going to ask Anthony to come up and bail me out if I get too far off track. But it's a way to try to calculate on the energy savings alone, the energy cost savings alone, how long would it take? And, you know, I was surprised in looking at the HVAC, for example, because I'm used to working in inland areas where, you know, you have these huge air conditioning costs during the summer and sometimes even the spring and fall because it just gets so hot. So the finances of HVAC upgrades in those areas is very different. As Tony explained, because we have the cooler climate here, it just doesn't have the same bang for your buck. But again, I would argue our systems are so old at our major facilities now, we're going to need to replace them anyway, regardless of the energy savings realities of it. So, but that's the basic thing. It's a calculation. Try to figure out how long is it going to take just based on the energy savings to pay for the upfront costs of that improvement.
But the payment would be much sooner than that, though. We would,
Yeah,
1%.
The payback or the payoff of the loan, yeah. Yeah, that's not going to take the however many years,
200
30 years.
some odd years.
Yeah, this is a 20-year term.
20-year loan.
Thank you. Thank you.
20-year loan.
Yep.
And I don't think there's any if for some reason a council down the road or a future city manager wanted to pay it off early, I don't think there's any kind of a
prepayment
penalty to that.
I don't believe so. Yeah. And yes, it was described correctly. One thing that it doesn't take into consideration is historically utility rates go up over time, 3 to 5%. You can sort of pick different windows to support whatever arguments you want to make, but on average 3 to 5% per year. And there are major blips where it goes up, and there are times that it's going to go down. For instance, community choice aggregation, you'll see a little bit of a dip. Nonetheless, the infrastructure of the distribution system needs to be upgraded, so there's going to be another major investment. So some will see that your cost of energy goes down, but SCE is going to increase charges because they now have to support an aged infrastructure as well. So But it doesn't take into account that 3 to 5% on average increase year over year. And as we've been talking so much about, the cost avoidance of the maintenance, something like the LEDs, the maintenance costs, repair costs associated.
Thank you. Rich?
So you've done an inventory of all the different things that we can improve energy with.
Yes.
But this is like, and tell me if I'm wrong, this is like a line of credit that we're applying for. So we can pick and choose along the way based on our finances, what we choose to get into first and when we choose to get into it. Like, for example, it was mentioned that like the street lighting would be a quicker payoff. So we could kind of move towards those first, say, I mean, it will be a decision made, but the council can kind of pick and choose these things along the way of what makes economic sense to the entire city. Am I correct or not? Or is there a penalty?
Yes, no, you can do essentially whatever you want to do.
Sure.
But the nature of this program and the benefit of this program, not only finding the money, but also engaging an energy services company, which is what the city set forth to do, is to do these projects at once and get the economies of scale of having a general contractor deployed through the city after having done that detailed investment grade audit to implement all of these projects at the same time.
Is there an estimate how much time that will take?
It depends on the scope, but usually within 12 months.
In a year?
You know, yes, and probably a lot less. The things that take us a little longer is just the procurement of some of the solar materials. But everything else, it's just a matter of coordination, and we work closely with the city so that we're not taking we're not on the roof during a rainy season, or, we coordinate the time around the city's schedule.
Sylvia?
So one more question along with that, tagging on with that, is that all this is coordinated under our capital improvement with Mr. Villafana and his team, right? I mean, it's all worked into the larger scope and larger game plan schedule and all of that, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. But the nice thing is we have the services of ENGIE to basically be, like Tony said, the general contractor. So it's not going to add a huge new workload to Don and Charles and the Public Works team. They'll be partners in it, but part of what we're paying the energy services company, in this case ENGIE, for is that to play that project coordinator role.
Okay, super.
Yes?
Well, I'd like to make a final comment. It would be remiss of me not to recognize the important roles of all of the directors here at the city. Throughout the month of June, July, August, September, I've been very tenacious in terms of coordinating various meetings, on-site meetings with NGs, and specifically to the entire team of Public Works. So I want to take this time to recognize Don Villafana, Charles Cable, and Peter Alcantar for assisting me in terms of coordinating with the NG team and allowing the engineers from NG to really be on site and to crawl through every crooks and ends of our facilities to look for options to save. And the collaborations and the coordinations among the various department directors have been tremendous, so I appreciate their support to move forward with this. So the timeline is very critical. Knowing that there's no other applicants at the state, we want to leverage this time frame to submit our application. So tentatively, I would be working very closely with the city attorneys and city clerks to get this resolution signed by your council and reconvene a conference call with NG team on Thursday, finalize the packet, and we'll send the applications to the state. And we're waiting for 3 months turnaround from the state to give us the approval so we can move forward with this project. And finally, I would be tremendous remiss of me not to say thank you to City Manager Butler for trusting me in managing this project from the endpoint of project coordinations and working with various entities here at the cities to get where we were back in June to where we are today in this particular stage. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, can I get a motion, please?
Sure. So I move to approve adopting a resolution of the City Council of Port Hueneme approving the energy efficiency loan from California Energy Commission.
I'd like to go down on record as seconding that, please.
Okay, we do have now a motion and a second to adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme approving an energy efficiency loan from the California Energy Commission to implement energy efficiency projects. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sounds unanimous to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job.
Thanks.
Okay, now we move on to council members' reports, comments, requests for future agenda items. What do we got? Sylvia?
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Berg. One thing that Rod mentioned in his comment a few minutes ago is that this could possibly be, hold on, Linda. This could possibly be Miss Linda Lee's last meeting with us, because I know that originally she had put in a resignation starting in March, right? Yeah. March 1st. Linda, come back here, please.
Get back.
I'd like to publicly recognize you and your service to the community and to all of us here on City Council. You have done an amazing job in the short amount of time that you've been here, but you have gone above and beyond any of our expectations and have really improved so many of our departments in so many areas that maybe were either a mess or, you know, maybe we just failed to check that box here and do this there. But it's almost as if you were a breath of fresh air that has come through and really organized this community and organized the city in a way that could have only been done by Linda Catherine Lee and in the time frame that you were given. And I do want to recognize you and your team for the amount of work that was done for our 70th anniversary this last year. We're still going through the final stages of it because it started in March and it'll end sometime in March here of 2019. But it's because of what you did and the creativity and just your sincere interest and appreciation for what the city had done that you allowed us to celebrate and celebrate in a magnificent way, without many resources being used, but really integrated different parts of the community, from the children to the bike ride to everything else that we did, the movies in the park at Hueneme Beach Park, all of that, and everything that we did here. I wanted to recognize you for all of that. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Linda Catherine Lee.
I'd like to second that. You know, like a mariner's compass, you've given us a direction. And you can read a map and see where you are, but if you don't know where you're going, the map doesn't do you any good at all. And you've given us a direction. And we can only hope that we continue going in that way. And I look forward to hearing great things about you wherever you go, because I know you'll be valued. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I miss you dearly. I appreciate all the hard work for the city of Hueneme. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your comment. I sincerely am honored to have this recognition. But the recognition can only go to the entire organizations, and I cannot accept that on my own. I have a tremendous leadership from everyone, and the partnerships and the collaborations from the department directors. I truly enjoy my time here at the city, and I have so much more to do in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And it's my goal to make sure that we set the transitions in place for a very smooth transition. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from council members?
Yes, you all nominated me to be on the Animal Services Board, and I want to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Quan, I do love animals, and it was funny. I went to my first meeting over at the Animal Services, and as I was stepping up into the meeting room, I was recalling the first time I ever went to Ventura County Animal Services when I was a little kid. I think I was 7 years old. The dog pound, as it was called, used to be on the shore of the Santa Clara River. And the day I went there, it was windy, hot, dusty, and those poor animals, I told my dad, I said, we got to take this guy. Fast forward to our meeting last week, and they were talking about the facility. And that facility they're in was never designed to be a dog pound. But they've done a tremendous job in piecing together a old dilapidated Air Force building, I guess, right? So it was pouring down rain. It was flooding the meeting room. They had rolled up towels to try and keep the water out. The dogs are barking. Everyone's having a great time. And they're talking about the idea of getting a state-of-the-art modern animal services building and facility. And it was really impressive. And the thing about moving forward on that is that I think the public loves animals, and I think at this point in Ventura County, that's probably time to really put together a state-of-the-art facility. So they're talking about things like we heard tonight. For example, all the dogs are streamed together, and so when one dog gets sick, all the dogs get sick. And so now the veterinarian bill is 10 times what it would be if the dogs were cordoned off. And so they showed us what a modern state-of-the-art facility would look like, and one from the city of Compton, of all places. And it's just amazing where it could go and where it should go. They talked about the fact that during the hot summer months and the cold winter months, that volunteers just show up by the hundreds, delivering ice, delivering whatever they can to benefit the animals there. So they're going to look at alternative financing and means to come up with a plan, a facility, a new site, and it just seems to me that it's a real positive time to be associated with animal services. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that report. Okay, anything else? Okay.
You know, I do have one more, unless somebody else was going to mention it. So this morning, I and my colleagues attended the State of the County address by Supervisor Kathy Long over here at the Orving, Kelly, sorry. The Long,
Kelly.
yes. The Longs. Over at the Orving Carpenter Community Center. And just have to tell you that the county really has it together. I mean, they talked about so many things that they're planning on, you know, with the Strategic Plan 2040. Yes, planning on the next 20 years of what the county's going to be doing. But certainly their goal of achieving certain reserves, they're almost there, and so many other wonderful things that they have even improved on in terms of, you know, audits, as well as the state-of-the-art hospital, VCMC, that's available to the community. So all in all, it seemed like a really good report. I did ask about, you know, what were some of the lessons learned with the Thomas Fire and Woolsey fire, and so she reported on that, and Mayor Berg thanked her for some of the services that had been implemented with, I think, within our like jail system and other places like that.
The county has invested quite heavily in a bookmobile for the county to serve underserved areas. And also there's a new program at the Juvenile Detention Center. It's a reading program for the juveniles that are incarcerated there. They keep them there anywhere from 1 day up to maybe 30 days, because being the age that they are, they can't keep them very long. But there's an active program in there now to you know, help them with their reading skills. Obviously,
yeah.
It's needed very much.
So, and she also then even mentioned that the Ventura County Library System, which is what our Port Hueneme Library falls under, and falls under the auspices of their work, is that they are opening up an East Ventura, a new site for the community, which all of us can partake in as well. But a really good report from her this morning.
Good. Thank you very much. Now, we can return now, if there's no further comments, to our open comment period, public comment. And I do have one speaker card from Jim Hensley.
Thank you, Mayor Bowden, distinguished council persons, staff, and citizens. How many have been to a powwow? Nobody? There you go, there you go. You now have an opportunity that's coming up. And the reasons I'm mentioning it, because I'm a member of the Vietnam Veterans of Ventura County. We support various different military programs, and many of our members are actually Native American. They seem to really pull in them and the Latinos and lower income people, unfortunately, in the Vietnam era. So anyway, we're going to be carrying the color guard for 2 days on April the 13th and April the 14th, Saturday and Sunday. And I'll just leave this, it's going to be at the Oxnard Beach Park. I'll leave one for the staff, and if somehow or another it's ordained that we can put it up in the audience or out for the chambers out there for the people to see, we would appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if seeing no other business, the council will now adjourn to the regular meeting of Tuesday, March the 4th, be held at 5:30 p.m. right here at City Hall, council chambers. This meeting is now adjourned. The time is 8:41.